Hey, and welcome to Puzzlehead. This channel is all about engaging stories with clever twists, unexpected turns, and moments that will pull you in emotionally. So, if you enjoy drama, surprises, and endings that truly hit, then you're in the right place. Subscribe and join us for stories full of secrets, intense moments, and satisfying outcomes. Now, don't forget to turn on notifications. The next puzzle is about to begin. The copper pipe pressed cold against my shoulder blade as I twisted the wrench one final turn. 38 years old, and I was still crawling under kitchen sinks like some rookie apprentice. But that's what happens when you marry a woman who changes her mind about tile colors 3 times in 1 week. Marcus, you almost done down there? Laura's voice drifted from somewhere above the cabinet doors. Just finishing the shut-off valve, I called back, my voice echoing in the cramped space beneath our new granite countertops. The ones I'd installed myself, naturally. Licensed contractor and former CPA. I was Laura's personal home improvement jackpot. The doorbell chimed, followed by the click of Laura's heels across the hardwood floors I'd refinished last spring. Everything in this house bore my fingerprints, my sweat, my pride. 4 years of evenings and weekends transforming a basic suburban box into something worthy of those home design magazines Laura kept stacked on her nightstand. Rachel, perfect timing. Laura's voice carried that artificial brightness she reserved for company. Come see what Marcus finished. My sister-in-law's laugh was sharp, like ice cubes hitting glass. God, Laura, this kitchen is gorgeous. Must be nice having a husband who actually knows which end of a hammer to hold. I adjusted my position, trying to get leverage on a stubborn fitting. The tile grout pressed into my knees through my work jeans. Above me, wine glasses clinked against the granite, the good Pinot Grigio Laura saved for special occasions. So, Rachel's voice dropped to that conspiratorial tone women use when they think they're alone. Have you told him you're moving out next month? My wrench stopped mid-turn. No way, Laura replied without hesitation. I need to secure my promotion first, then take half the accounts. The timing has to be perfect. The copper pipe suddenly felt like ice against my neck. I held my breath, every muscle frozen except for my heart, which was trying to jackhammer its way out of my chest. Smart, Rachel said. How long do you think before he figures it out? Marcus, please. He's so focused on his little construction projects, he barely notices what I'm doing anymore. Besides, I've been playing the loving wife perfectly. He has no idea. They laughed together, the sound echoing off the ceramic backsplash I'd spent 3 weekends installing. Every tile placed with mathematical precision, grouted with the patience of a man who thought he was building something permanent. And Scott? Rachel's voice carried a knowing smirk. What about Scott? Come on, Laura. The whole office knows you two have been working late together a lot. Laura's pause stretched long enough for me to count my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Scott understands ambition, she finally said. Unlike some people who gave up a perfectly good accounting career to play with power tools. The wrench slipped from my grip, clattering against the pipe. I froze, waiting for them to investigate the noise. Instead, their conversation continued without missing a beat. When's the promotion announcement? Rachel asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. The board meets Thursday to finalize everything. Once that's locked in, I'll have the leverage I need. Marcus won't fight the divorce. He's too nice, too predictable. And the accounts? I've been building those client relationships for 5 years. They'll follow me wherever I go. Marcus might have built this kitchen, but I built my career. He can keep the house. I'll take the real assets. I lay there in the darkness beneath the sink, surrounded by the smell of new caulk and old lies. The irony wasn't lost on me. While installing new flooring in our kitchen, I'd discovered the foundation of our marriage was completely rotten. You're brilliant, Rachel said. Tom would never see something like this coming either. Men are so oblivious. It's not oblivious, Laura corrected. It's arrogant. They think because they can fix a leaky faucet or balance a checkbook, they understand everything. Marcus has no idea how the real world works. Above me, their footsteps moved toward the living room. I waited until I heard the couch springs compress before I carefully slid out from under the cabinet. My knees protested as I stood, joints stiff from lying motionless on the tile floor. The kitchen looked different now. The pendant lights I'd hung cast shadows that seemed darker. The island I'd custom built felt like a barrier instead of a gathering place. Everything I'd crafted with love and pride had become a stage set for deception. I packed my tools methodically, muscle memory taking over while my mind raced. Laura thought I was predictable, too nice. She was about to learn that being underestimated was sometimes an advantage. From the living room came the sound of their conversation, shifting to safer topics. Rachel's kids, Laura's yoga class, some mutual friends' marital drama. Normal sister-in-law chatter, as if the last 10 minutes had never happened. But they had happened. Every word was burned into my memory with the clarity of fresh trauma. Laura wanted out. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. And she expected me to roll over like some defeated suburban husband, grateful for whatever scraps she decided to leave behind. I closed my toolbox with a soft click and headed for the garage. Behind me, Laura called out sweetly, "Thanks for fixing the leak, honey. You're the best." I didn't trust myself to respond. In the garage, surrounded by the organized chaos of my workshop, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd discovered. Anger, yes. Betrayal, absolutely. But underneath those expected emotions was something else. A cold, calculating fury that reminded me why I'd been good at accounting before I'd fallen in love with building things. Laura thought she understood leverage. She was about to get a masterclass. Because here's what my dear wife had forgotten in her careful planning. I wasn't just some contractor who happened to be good with numbers. I was a licensed CPA who'd left corporate finance to pursue a passion. Not because I couldn't handle the real world, but because I'd gotten tired of cleaning up other people's financial messes. I'd been managing our accounts for 8 years. Every investment, every tax strategy, every financial decision had my fingerprints on it. Laura might have been building client relationships, but I'd been building something much more substantial, the entire economic foundation of our life together. And if she wanted to play games with timing, well, she was about to discover that I understood timing too. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. My old partner at the accounting firm, David Chen, who now specialized in asset protection and divorce financial planning. "David, it's Marcus. I need to ask you a hypothetical question about marital assets and timing." The next morning arrived with the kind of artificial normalcy that makes your skin crawl. Laura hummed while making coffee, the same off-key rendition of some pop song she'd been torturing me with for months. She wore her navy business suit, the one that made her feel powerful, and her smile carried just enough warmth to seem genuine to anyone who hadn't heard her planning their destruction the night before. "Sleep well?" she asked, handing me a mug with "World's Greatest Husband" printed on the side. A gift from last Christmas that now felt like a cruel joke. "Like a rock," I lied, accepting the coffee. In reality, I'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, running calculations and timelines through my head. Old habits from my accounting days, when faced with a complex problem, break it down into manageable components. Component 1, Laura's promotion timeline, 2 to 3 weeks, board meeting Thursday. Component 2, her plan to take half the accounts, client relationships she'd been cultivating for 5 years. Component 3, Scott, the real estate agent who understood ambition. Component 4, my own resources and advantages. This was going to be the interesting part. "I've got that client dinner tonight," Laura said, checking her reflection in the toaster. "Probably won't be home until late. The Morrison account? Among others. You know how these things go. One dinner turns into drinks, turns into networking until midnight." She kissed my cheek, her lips barely making contact. "Don't wait up." I watched her gather her purse, her laptop bag, her gym clothes for the morning workout she'd probably skip. Every movement was familiar, but now I saw it through a different lens. The extra attention to her appearance, the vague explanations about work events, the gym bag that came home suspiciously unrumpled. How long had I been this blind? "Marcus?" Laura paused at the kitchen door. "You're staring." "Just admiring my handiwork," I said, gesturing at the backsplash. Turned out better than I expected. She followed my gaze to the tile work, and for a moment something flickered across her face. Guilt? Regret? Or maybe just impatience to get this charade over with. "It's beautiful," she said. "You're very talented." After she left, I sat in our kitchen, my kitchen, and made a list. Not the emotional, rage-fueled kind of list a betrayed husband might scribble on a napkin. This was a proper accounting ledger with columns and priorities and action items. At the top of the page, I wrote, Assets and Liabilities Assessment. Under Assets, I listed everything I could think of. The house, purchased before marriage, but significantly improved with marital funds. Joint savings accounts. Investment portfolio. Laura's 401k. My contractor business and equipment, the truck. Laura's car. Even smaller items like jewelry, art, electronics. Under liabilities, I was more creative. Laura's student loans, which I'd been helping pay down, the credit card debt from her shopping habits, the second mortgage we'd taken to fund the kitchen renovation, and now, potentially, the professional consequences of whatever she was doing with Scott. But the most important list was the third one, information and timing. Laura thought she was playing chess while I played checkers. She was about to discover that I'd been playing chess all along. I just hadn't realized we were opponents until yesterday. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Can meet for lunch today. Bring financial docs if you have them handy. I spent the morning gathering paperwork. Bank statements, investment records, tax returns, insurance policies. The paper trail of our life together, organized in the same meticulous way I'd organized corporate audits for 12 years. Hidden in the back of my filing cabinet was a folder I'd forgotten about, our prenup. Laura had insisted on it back when she was making more money than me and worried about protecting her assets. Funny how perspectives change. I pulled it out and read through the clauses I'd agreed to 8 years ago. Infidelity clause. Right there on page 3. In case of infidelity by either party, the offending spouse forfeits claim to assets acquired during marriage, with exceptions for items purchased independently with documented separate funds. I'd signed it without much thought, confident that neither of us would cheat. Laura had been more thorough, apparently understanding even then that marriage was as much a business arrangement as a romantic partnership. Now that clause looked like a gift from my younger, more naive self. David met me at Romano's, a quiet Italian place where we could talk without interruption. He looked exactly the same as when I'd left the firm 3 years ago. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the kind of focused attention that made clients pay premium rates. So, he said after we'd ordered, tell me about this hypothetical situation. I laid out the facts without editorial comment. The overheard conversation, Laura's promotion timeline, the suspected affair, the prenup clause. David listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on his legal pad. Hypothetically speaking, he said when I finished, your friend would have several advantages. The prenup clause is enforceable if infidelity can be proven. The timing of asset transfers matters. Anything moved after filing for divorce can be scrutinized, but legitimate financial planning done beforehand is generally protected. What kind of financial planning? Trusts, retirement account adjustments, business restructuring. The key is having legitimate reasons for any changes and making them before the spouse has reason to suspect divorce proceedings. I nodded, filing away every detail. One more thing, David continued. Documentation is everything. Recordings, photographs, financial records, communications. The spouse who comes to court with better evidence usually wins. And if someone wanted to protect themselves from a spouse who planned to steal business accounts, David's smile was thin and professional. That would be a separate matter entirely. Corporate theft, breach of fiduciary duty, violation of non-compete agreements, much more serious than divorce proceedings. We finished lunch discussing hypothetical strategies and theoretical timelines. By the time I shook David's hand in the parking lot, I had a clear action plan. Laura thought she had 2 or 3 weeks to secure her promotion before pulling the trigger. She was about to discover that her timeline had just accelerated. That evening, I worked in the garage while waiting for her to come home from her client dinner. At 11:30, her headlights swept across the driveway. I listened to her car door slam, her heels clicking on the walkway, the front door opening with the soft beep of our security system. Marcus, she called, you still up? In the garage, I answered. She appeared in the doorway wearing the same business suit from morning, but her hair was slightly mussed and her lipstick had been reapplied. The kind of details you notice when you're looking for them. How was the client dinner? I asked, not looking up from the cabinet door I was sanding. Long, productive. The Morrison account is going to be huge for us. She leaned against the workbench watching me work. What are you building now? Storage cabinet for the laundry room? Figured we could use more organization. Always planning ahead, she said, and there was something in her tone that made me glance up. That's what I love about you, Marcus. You think everything through. I met her eyes, searching for some hint of the woman who'd been plotting my destruction 24 hours ago. But Laura was a good actress. She always had been. The face looking back at me showed nothing but mild affection and end-of-workday fatigue. Some things are worth planning for, I said. She kissed the top of my head and headed inside. Don't stay up too late. Tomorrow's a big day. She was right about that, though not in the way she imagined. After she went to bed, I made one final call. David, it's Marcus again. I've decided my hypothetical friend needs to stop being hypothetical. How quickly can we move? Thursday morning brought the kind of crisp October weather that makes you believe in fresh starts. Laura left early for her board meeting, practically vibrating with nervous energy. She'd changed outfits 3 times, settling on a charcoal gray suit that projected authority without being intimidating. Wish me luck, she said, adjusting her earrings one final time. You don't need luck, I replied, and meant it. Laura was genuinely talented at her job. It was everything else about her that had turned out to be fiction. I waited 30 minutes after her car disappeared before making my first call. Morrison Industries, this is Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer, this is Marcus Fairburn. I'm Laura Staples' husband. Is Mr. Morrison available? I have some concerns about potential irregularities in my wife's client management practices. The silence stretched long enough for me to count my heartbeats. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice had shifted to careful professional neutrality. I'll see if Mr. Morrison is available to speak with you, Mr. Fairburn. While I waited on hold, I reviewed the notes I'd prepared. Nothing accusatory or emotional, just factual concerns about potential conflicts of interest and ethical violations. The kind of language that would trigger an internal review without making me look like a vindictive spouse. Marcus? Tom Morrison's voice was cautious. Jennifer said you had concerns about Laura's account management. I do, Tom. And I want to be clear, this isn't about our marriage. This is about protecting your company from potential liability. I laid out what I knew carefully. Laura's relationship with Scott Williams, the planned theft of the client accounts, the timeline that coincided suspiciously with her promotion review. I presented it as a concerned husband who'd stumbled across information that could damage Morrison Industries. These are serious allegations, Marcus. I know, that's why I'm bringing them to you directly instead of going to your competitors or the state licensing board. Laura's talented, but if she's planning to violate her non-compete agreement, you need to know before she's in a position to do maximum damage. Tom promised to look into it discreetly. I thanked him and hung up, then immediately called David. Phase 1 complete, I reported. How are we doing on the financial restructuring? Trust documents are ready for signature. I've also prepared the business reorganization paperwork for your contracting company. Once these are filed, your personal assets will be significantly protected. And the timeline? We can have everything finalized by end of business today. I'd recommend moving quickly. If your wife's promotion gets approved, she'll have more resources to fight back. I spent the morning signing papers and transferring assets. By noon, Fairburn Construction had been reorganized as an LLC with complex ownership structures that would take Laura's lawyers months to unravel. The house had been transferred to a revocable trust established years earlier for estate planning purposes, completely legal and well documented. Most importantly, our joint accounts had been restructured, not emptied. That would have been too obvious and potentially illegal, but reorganized in ways that gave me administrative control while maintaining Laura's technical access. She could still use her debit card and write checks, but any major transactions would require my approval. At 2 o'clock, my phone rang. Laura's number. Marcus? Her voice was tight with stress. Something weird is happening at work. Tom Morrison called me into his office asking strange questions about my client relationships. What kind of questions? About Scott, about my promotion timeline, about whether I was planning to leave the company. It was like he knew things he shouldn't know. I made appropriate concerned husband noises while silently celebrating. Tom Morrison was even more paranoid about corporate espionage than I'd hoped. I'm sure it's nothing, I said. Maybe just standard due diligence before the promotion announcement. Maybe. But she didn't sound convinced. I'll be home late again tonight. This whole thing has thrown off my schedule. After she hung up, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Laura's carefully planned timeline was already crumbling, and she had no idea why. That evening, I was installing new locks on my workshop when Rachel's car pulled into the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched her and Laura huddled together at the island, their voices too low to hear, but their body language screaming crisis management. I finished with the locks and headed inside, playing the role of oblivious husband returning from honest work. "Rachel, good to see you." I kissed my sister-in-law's cheek, noting how she stiffened at the contact. "How's Tom?" "Fine," she said quickly. "Just fine." Laura was pacing behind the island, her nervous energy filling the kitchen like static electricity. "Marcus, did you talk to anyone about my work today?" The question was casual, but her eyes were sharp with suspicion. "Your work?" "No, why would I?" "Someone's been asking questions. Tom Morrison seemed to know things about my client relationships that should have been confidential." I shrugged, opening the refrigerator to grab a beer. "Corporate politics, probably. You know how these promotion processes go? Everyone gets paranoid." Rachel and Laura exchanged a look that confirmed my suspicions. They were already wondering if their conversation yesterday had been overheard. "You were working under the sink when I got here yesterday," Rachel said slowly. "How long were you down there?" "About an hour. Why?" Another look between the sisters. Laura's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "No reason, she said. "Just trying to figure out the timing." I took a long pull from my beer, letting the silence stretch. Finally, Rachel cleared her throat. "I should get going. Tom's expecting me for dinner." After she left, Laura and I went through our evening routine, the kind of artificial normalcy that precedes major explosions. She made phone calls to colleagues, trying to figure out who might have leaked information about her plans. I watched the news and responded to work emails, the picture of domestic tranquility. But underneath the surface, we were both calculating. Laura was trying to figure out how much I knew and how much damage had been done to her promotion prospects. I was planning my next moves, while she was still reacting to my first ones. At bedtime, she tried a different approach. "Marcus?" She slid into bed beside me, her hand finding my chest. "I know I've been distracted lately with work stress. Maybe this weekend we could do something together, just the two of us?" Her touch felt like ice water, but I covered her hand with mine and squeezed gently. "I'd like that," I said. "It feels like we haven't really talked in months." She relaxed slightly, interpreting my response as evidence that I was still the same predictable, manageable husband she'd been planning to discard. "Good?" she whispered. "I love you, you know." "I know," I replied, and technically it wasn't a lie. I did know she loved me, or at least she loved the version of me that existed in her head. The compliant contractor who built her dream kitchen and asked no uncomfortable questions about her late nights and suspicious phone calls. She was about to meet a different version of Marcus Fairburn entirely. After she fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and went to my workshop. Hidden behind my tool cabinet was a small digital recorder I'd purchased that afternoon. Tomorrow, I would plant it in Laura's car. If she was meeting with Scott to discuss damage control, I wanted to hear every word. But first, I had one more call to make. "David, sorry for calling so late. I need you to prepare divorce papers. Full fault divorce, citing infidelity and breach of fiduciary duty. I want them ready to file Monday morning." "That's pretty aggressive timing, Marcus. Are you sure you want to move this fast?" I looked through the workshop window at our house, the house I'd renovated with my own hands, where I'd discovered my wife's betrayal while fixing a leak she'd probably caused on purpose to keep me busy while she plotted. "I'm sure," I said. "Laura wanted to control the timing of this divorce. She's about to learn that timing is a two-player game." Friday morning, Laura left for work with the determined stride of someone heading into battle. Her promotion review had been postponed pending the Morrison Industries investigation, but she still believed she could salvage the situation through sheer force of will and careful damage control. I gave her a 30-minute head start, then followed at a discreet distance. The recording device I'd planted in her car the night before was already paying dividends. Through the small receiver in my truck, I'd listened to her phone conversation with Scott during her commute. They were meeting for lunch at the Marriott downtown, the same hotel whose name I'd found written on the back of Scott's business card. "We need to figure out who's talking," Laura had said, her voice tight with stress. "Someone knows about us, and they're feeding information to Tom Morrison." Scott's response had been predictably self-serving.
Maybe we should cool things down until this blows over. Cool things down? Laura's voice had risen dangerously. Scott, I'm about to lose my promotion because of this investigation. I need you to help me figure out who's sabotaging us, not abandon ship at the first sign of trouble. Now I sat in the Marriott parking lot, watching the entrance through binoculars while the receiver crackled with the ambient noise from Laura's purse. At 12:15, Scott's silver BMW pulled into a space near the hotel entrance. He emerged looking like every successful real estate agent in America. Expensive suit, perfect hair, and the kind of confident swagger that comes from never facing real consequences. Laura arrived 10 minutes later, her body language radiating fury, even from a distance. I watched them embrace in the parking lot, not the casual hug of business associates, but the desperate clutch of conspirators whose plans were falling apart. Through the receiver, their conversation was crystal clear. "This is a disaster," Laura said without preamble. "Tom Morrison knows about our relationship. He knows about my timeline for leaving the company. Someone fed him information that only a few people could have known." "Who did you tell?" Scott's voice carried an accusatory edge. "Nobody, well, except Rachel, but she would never—" Laura stopped mid-sentence. "Oh God, Rachel. Your sister ratted us out?" "No, not intentionally. But yesterday she asked Marcus about timing, about how long he was working under the sink when she visited. What if he heard us talking?" My grip tightened on the binoculars. Even from across the parking lot, I could see Scott's face pale. "Your husband knows?" "I don't know, maybe. He's been acting strange, asking innocent questions that don't feel innocent. And this morning I checked our bank accounts. There have been some transfers I don't understand." "What kind of transfers?" "Money moved into accounts I don't recognize. The house deed shows some kind of trust arrangement that wasn't there last month. Either Marcus is planning something or we're both getting paranoid." Scott paced in small circles, his real estate agent composure cracking. "Laura, if your husband knows about us and he's already moving assets, we're screwed. Guys like him, they plan everything out. He probably has lawyers already." "Guys like him?" Laura's voice turned sharp. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Come on, he's an accountant who became a contractor. Detail-oriented, methodical, probably holds grudges. If he's been planning this while pretending everything's normal, we're not dealing with some emotional reaction. We're dealing with a calculated response." I had to admit, Scott's assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Laura's voice dropped to a whisper. "So what do we do?" "We accelerate everything. Forget the promotion. You need to secure those client accounts now, before he can do more damage. I'll help you set up the new company structure. We can be operational by next week." "That's corporate theft, Scott. If I get caught, you're already caught. The question is whether you go down with nothing or whether you salvage what you can." I'd heard enough. I started my truck and drove to David's office, the recorder still picking up fragments of their increasingly desperate conversation. David listened to the recording with the focused attention of a hunter evaluating prey. "This is better than I hoped," he said when it finished. "She's not just planning infidelity and divorce fraud, she's planning corporate theft. We can use this to destroy her professionally and personally. What's our next move? We accelerate everything. File the divorce papers today instead of Monday. Serve her at work in front of her colleagues. Make it clear that you know about Scott and the account theft. Force her into a defensive position before she can execute her backup plan." "That seems aggressive." David's smile was sharp as a blade. "Marcus, your wife has been planning to destroy your life for months. She's stolen from your marriage. She's about to steal from her employer. And she's been treating you like an idiot who's too stupid to notice. Aggressive is exactly what this situation requires." 2 hours later, I sat in my truck outside Morrison Industries, watching a process server walk through the front entrance. Laura's divorce papers were in his briefcase, along with copies of the recording and a detailed timeline of her planned corporate theft. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Package delivered. Subject appeared shocked. Multiple witnesses present." I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction, then drove home to wait. Laura's car screeched into the driveway at 4:30, tires smoking as she slammed on the brakes. She burst through the front door like a hurricane, divorce papers clutched in her fist. "Marcus!" Her voice echoed through the house. "Marcus, get down here, right now!" I emerged from the workshop, wiping my hands on a shop rag with deliberate calm. "Hey, honey, you're home early." She threw the papers at me. the pages scattering across the hardwood floor I'd refinished with such care. Don't you dare, hey, honey me, you manipulative fool. How long have you been planning this? I bent to gather the scattered documents, taking my time. Planning what, Laura? The divorce, the asset transfers, the recording. Her voice cracked on the last word. You recorded me, Marcus. You violated my privacy and used it to destroy my career. I protected myself from a wife who was planning to steal half our assets and disappear with her boyfriend. I straightened up, meeting her eyes directly. The question isn't how long I've been planning this. The question is how long you've been lying to me. She stared at me as if seeing a stranger. You're not this person, Marcus. You don't do things like this. You're right, I said. The Marcus you married wouldn't do things like this. But that Marcus trusted his wife. That Marcus believed in his marriage. You eliminated that version of me when you decided to treat our relationship like a business transaction. Laura sank onto the couch, the fight draining out of her, as the full scope of her situation became clear. Tom Morrison fired me, she said quietly. Security escorted me out of the building. My career's over. Your career was over the moment you decided to steal client accounts. I just accelerated the timeline. She looked up at me with something that might have been respect mixed with her hatred. You planned all of this. The investigation, the asset protection, the divorce filing. While I was scheming with Rachel, you were 10 steps ahead. 12 steps, I corrected, but who's counting? Laura laughed, a sound devoid of humor. I underestimated you. Yes, I agreed. You did. She stood up slowly, gathering the divorce papers with shaking hands. What happens now? Now you call a lawyer and figure out how to minimize the damage. The prenup is clear about infidelity. The recordings prove corporate theft conspiracy. Your best option is to negotiate a settlement that doesn't leave you completely destroyed. And if I fight this? I met her eyes with the cold certainty of someone who'd already calculated every possible outcome. Then I released the full recordings to the state licensing board, the Better Business Bureau, and every major employer in your industry. I turned this from a private divorce into a public scandal that follows you for the rest of your career. Laura nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. You really are a different person, she said. No, I replied. I'm the same person I've always been. You just never bothered to pay attention. After she left to pack a bag and find somewhere to stay, I sat in the kitchen we'd planned together, surrounded by the tile work I'd installed with such optimism. The house felt different now, not empty but clean, like an infection had been removed. My phone rang, David's number. How did it go? Better than expected, I said. When she's broken, it'll take her months to recover enough to mount any kind of defense. And Scott? I smiled, remembering the final part of the recording I hadn't shared with Laura. Scott's about to have problems of his own. Turns out his real estate license requires disclosure of personal relationships that might constitute conflicts of interest. His broker is going to be very interested in his affair with a married client. You're thorough, Marcus. I learned from the best, I said, looking around the kitchen that had become ground zero for the destruction of my marriage. Laura wanted to control the timing of our divorce. She got her wish, just not the way she expected.